that I'll be talking about nutrient cycle and water quality in context of urban lakes. So these are the questions I'm going to tackle in my presentation. I'll not go by each and every question, but I'll be covering all these questions during my talk. And as I just now mentioned, I'll try to make my talk as simple as possible, because I know that as engineers, we lose contact with chemistry, when we are in 12th grade. So, and when we talk about water quality, it's mostly chemistry, biology, mostly chemistry and biology. So I'll try to make it as simple as possible. And if you have any question, you can post it, as Veena has already mentioned. And then we can leave at least 5 to 10 minutes in the end just to go through the question and answers. So yeah, so maybe before starting the discussion about the water quality, let me just tell you or discuss about how the lakes are categorized based on the trophic state. Now, what is trophic state? Trophic state is assessed by using a trophic index, by assessing trophic index. And trophic index includes parameters such as productivity, nutrients, how much biodiversity a lake can support, what kind of aquatic flora and fauna is present in the lake. So based on the trophic state, lakes are categorized as oligotrophic lakes, which are basically pristine lakes. Then we have mesotrophic lakes, where these kind of lakes support aquatic flora and fauna, both submerged and emergent. When I say submerged means under the water on the lake bed, and emergent means at the banks of the lake. Then
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can you make the slide full screen?
It's full screen for me.
Okay.
Is it not full screen for you?
Somebody has posted this question.
It's showing your notes also.
Yeah,
it's like
it
in the presentation mode.
It's showing it in notes mode, so you can see your notes.
Okay, just hold on. I'll just remove this thing. These internet things, they just. Okay, now you just let me know. Is it better now?
Yeah, this is right.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. And then we have eutrophic lakes. Eutrophic lakes, again, they support aquatic flora and fauna with lesser biodiversity. But there are episodically, there are some algal blooms and cyanobacterial blooms in these lakes. And then there are hypereutrophic lakes, which are have cyanobacterial bloom throughout the year. Now, let me just, now if you look at the life cycle of a lake, there is an oligotrophic lake, which I just now explained you. They are termed as pristine lakes. Pristine lakes, they are very clear. The turbidity in water is minimal, and it supports a lot of fish, but the nutrient in these kind of lakes is very poor. So you don't have, the productivity is almost nil, and you don't have any kind of aquatic flora in these, there are, because these kind of lakes lacks nitrogen and phosphorus, so there are no plant species or macrophytes, emergent macrophytes growing in these kind of lakes. Then you have mesotrophic lakes, where the lake has, there is some amount of nitrogen and phosphorus entering into the lake. And because of that nitrogen and phosphorus entering into the lake, there are some kind of plants which are emergent and submergent plants which are growing in these lakes. And then you have eutrophic, where inputs or nutrient inputs are so high that there are algal blooms, as I just now mentioned, that there are algal blooms, and there is lower biodiversity, and even the submergent macrophyte, they cease to exist. Now, this is the natural process. Even if you take any lake which is pristine right now, over the period of time, maybe 100 to 100 years, eventually it will move to mesotrophic state, and then it will become eutrophic, it will convert into wetland, and then finally it will just be a natural land. So this is a natural trajectory for a lake. But what is happening right now is, because of human anthropogenic activities which humans are carrying out in the catchment, we are adding nutrients faster and faster, and because of which we are, like, the lakes, in spite of, like, becoming eutrophic in 100 years, we are accelerating the process, and then the lakes will become eutrophic within, like, 10 years. So this is the kind of, like, impact human activities are having by adding nutrients into the lake. Now the question is, what are these nutrients we are talking about? So first of all, let us understand why these nutrients are so important and why we are talking about these nutrients. Now the thing is that all living organisms, they require 20 basic elements for their growth, which we require in trace quantities, like copper, zinc, nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur. All these kind of new elements we human beings or any kind of living organism require for its growth. Now, out of these 20 elements, 2 elements are most important, which is nitrogen and phosphorus. As you know, like, even during COVID periods, everybody knows, like, our proteins, fats, everything requires nitrogen. Nitrogen is required for production of proteins and nucleic acids, and phosphorus is required for production of nucleic acid and substances which are used in conversion of energy into cells, right? For example, in case of plants, like, plants do all the photosynthetic processes to generate energy, and that energy is converted into leaves or into branches only when the phosphorus is there, and it converts energy into cell, and that is how plants grow. So that is why nitrogen and phosphorus are called as building blocks for living organisms. They are very, very important. So if nitrogen and phosphorus are there, plants will grow and their growth will accelerate. Now, from where these nutrients come into picture, now let us understand from where. So now we are talking about nitrogen and phosphorus, from where this nitrogen comes. So nitrogen is present in atmosphere. I think everybody knows, like, we have huge reserves of nitrogen gas in atmosphere. Now the point here is, whatever nitrogen we are inhaling, that nitrogen directly is not getting converted into protein. So let me tell you, our proteins are made of amino acid, and amino acid is basically long chains made of nitrogen molecules. Okay, so this nitrogen, now if we inhale directly nitrogen, it doesn't mean that, like, it will directly get converted into proteins. No, we can assimilate nitrogen only when it is converted into organic nitrogen. That is for humans. But for plants, they can assimilate when nitrogen gas is converted into ammonia and nitrates. Okay, and in earlier days, before industrial revolution, it was done by bacteria, right? It was before industrial revolution, it was done by bacteria. So we have this atmospheric nitrogen. Atmospheric nitrogen was taken by leguminous roots of leguminous plants like peas, lettuce. All these plant roots, they have these bacteria which can convert N2, which is nitrogen gas, into ammonia. It is taken up by plants, and that nitrogen we can take and convert it into protein, and this is how we function. Our muscle grows, and our DNA and proteins and nucleic acids are formed. So, and the thing you should remember here is that the total amount of nitrogen on the earth or in the atmosphere is constant. It has been constant since the earth came in origin. From the earlier days, whatever nitrogen gas is there, the nitrogen gas is limited. And we are taking the nitrogen gas, converting into some other form, and then we are putting the nitrogen gas back into the atmosphere. So there is a nitrogen cycle, which I will explain in my later presentation. Coming to phosphorus, as I mentioned, nitrogen and phosphorus, 2 very important components. Now, from where phosphorus comes? Phosphorus is present in rocks. Okay, now, so as contrary to nitrogen which is present in atmosphere, phosphorus is present in rocks, and in rocks also it is bound to, like, to the particles. Only because of weathering, when there is rain falls, because of weathering, the phosphorus gets removed from these rocks. It gets mixed with the soil, and on the soil surface, bacteria converts that phosphorus which is bound to the rock material into phosphorus which is dissolved in water and can be uptaken by bacteria. So I hope now it is clear. For nitrogen gas, again, bacteria convert it into the forms which can be taken up by the plants. For phosphorus, very, very limited, only converted by bacteria. So weathering removes the phosphorus from rocks. It gets converted by bacteria, and then it is uptaken by plants, and by plants it is taken up by humans. So I think now it is very, very clear here. I try to make it clear because this understanding will help you in understanding why eutrophication happens in the lake, and why lakes are categorized as contaminated, and how we can remove these nutrients from wastewater. So let me give you an example of oligotrophic lake. I think everybody has heard about Mansarovar Lake. Mansarovar Lake is in Himalayas, very high up in the mountains. In the catchment of Mansarovar Lake, there is hardly any human activities. The agriculture is nil, so there is no no fertilizers which are being added. So if you look at the lake, it's pristine, and the lake is so clear that even at 10 to 15 feet, you can just see the lake bed. Productivity, now here I see this lake is very low in productivity because nutrients are entering into the lakes are almost nil. So productivity of the lake is almost nil, and the quality is very good. Now coming to Mesotrophic Lake. Now, example of Mesotrophic lake could be Lake Powai. Now, this is a lake which is still used as a water supply lake for Mumbai city. Now, in this lake, if you go, you will find that there are some nutrients which are entering from the catchment. Now, sewage and treated effluents are not allowed to enter into this lake because it is used for drinking water. But whenever there is a rain event, from the catchment, water will enter into the lake, and that water will have some amount of phosphorus because phosphorus is present in the soil, phosphorus is present in the organic material, and nitrogen, again, nitrogen is present in organic material, it will enter into the lake. So there will be some amount of nutrients. And when there is nutrient, there will be emergent plants, submergent plants. Now these are the submergent plants which can grow on the lake bed. So you will find submergent plants in the lake bed of Lake Powai. So this is the example of Mesotrophic lake. Coming to Eutrophic lake, take an example of Jakkur Lake. If you visit Jakkur Lake, you will see lake is clean, lake is green, sorry. Lake is green, it's completely green, and sometimes you will see there will be a thick layer of a kind of a green blanket floating on the surface of Jakkur Lake. Now, why it is happening? Because this lake is very, very productive. And it's so productive that algae is growing at such a faster pace that there are no submergent plants. Now for submergent plants to grow, enough light should penetrate to the lake bed. Now when you have a lot of algae growing in, the light penetration is hampered, and as a result, there's no submergent macrophytes in these lakes. You will see a lot of algal bloom, cyanobacterial bloom, and then in some patches you will also have water hyacinth, which again grows where the nutrients are in excess. So these are the examples of 3 lakes. I have tried to give you an example of the oligotrophic, mesotrophic, and eutrophic lakes. So again, like, when I talk about eutrophication, now take an example of Jakkur Lake. I told you that Jakkur Lake is eutrophied. There's a lot of algal growth. Now you can ask this question, why this so much algal bloom is happening in Jakkur Lake? Now the answer is that Jakkur Lake receives its inflows from treated effluent from secondary wastewater treatment plant, which earlier was 10 million liters capacity, per day capacity, and now it has been upgraded to 15 million liters capacity. So that is what Jakkur Lake inflow is. And in addition to that, Jakkur Lake is also receiving inflows from a drain, which is bringing raw sewage from the catchment. So there is some amount of 0.1 or 0.01% of raw sewage also entering into Jakkur Lake. But before it enters into Jakkur Lake, it is first entering into constructed wetland. So there are two inflows. One is treated effluent, then raw sewage, both enters into constructed wetland, and from constructed wetland, it enters into the lake. Now, the amount of nutrients which are entering into the lake are so high that the algae is just blooming in the lake. Now I will tell you why these treatment plants are not functioning, or what's happening with the wastewater treatment plant as well as the constructed wetland in Jakkur Lake. So now the question is, now what I'm trying to explain here is that eutrophication occurs because of excess of nutrients, which is again nitrogen and phosphorus. And I have already explained to you why nitrogen and phosphorus are so important, because they are building blocks. Earlier, nitrogen and phosphorus was made available by bacteria, because they were the only one who were converting nitrogen gas into ammonia and nitrates, and they were the one who were converting phosphates, which was binded to the rock, into phosphate, which can easily taken up by bacteria. But because of industrial revolution, what started happening is that we started creating urea through industrialized process. Now, because of excess urea, because of wastewater also has a lot of nitrogen, because whatever we eat, and we flush, our feces contains a lot of nitrogen. That nitrogen is in organic form, but when bacteria is present in nature, in water, they will quickly convert that organic nitrogen into ammonia. Okay, so I'm trying to tell here, and I hope you can see my cursor. So historically, we used to have this atmospheric nitrogen. Bacteria used to convert it into organic nitrogen, which was quickly uptaken by plants, and then it was quickly uptaken by plants. Once plants die, or then it was uptaken by human beings. Once the plants die, again bacteria will act on it. So there are two processes: nitrification, conversion of nitrogen into ammonia, which can be taken by bacteria, and then denitrification, conversion of ammonia into nitrogen gas. So if you can see here, there are 5 processes: nitrogen fixation, assimilation, ammonification, nitrification, denitrification. So let me just tell you in very simple terms. There are bacteria and there is nitrogen gas in the atmosphere. Nitrogen gas, bacteria will convert into amino acids or ammonia, which will be taken up by plants. Plants and animals will eat plants, and then nitrogen will get into our bodies. Once plants and animals die, they decay. Then, because of denitrification process, the whatever nitrogen there is inside us or in our tissues, in our molecules, it will get converted into nitrogen gas. So basically what I'm trying to say is that it is the same nitrogen which was formed billion of years ago. Same nitrogen is circulating in the atmosphere, on the earth. Now what is happening right now is, earlier, as I told, it was just bacteria which was doing the job. Now we have, because of industrial revolution, we have started adding more and more nitrogen into the water bodies. In addition to that, human wastewater, as I just now told, also contains a lot of nitrogen in organic form. Now, when that nitrogen is discharged into the water, bacteria starts acting on it. They will convert it into ammonia, nitrates, and once it is get converted into ammonia and nitrates, bacteria will start growing, and then you see algae will start growing, and then you see a harmful algal bloom. Similarly with phosphorus, as you all know, like just now I discussed earlier, it was phosphorus was just present in rocks, and because of weathering only, it was getting on into the soil, and bacteria was making it available to plants. But because of industrial revolution, we have phosphorus in our detergents, we have phosphorus in our fertilizers, and everything is not consumed but by the plants. Whatever we apply as a fertilizer, it is not uptaken by plants. Most of it will run off, will enter into water bodies through runoff. And in our sewage, because we use detergent, because human body, human feces also have a lot of phosphates, everything enters into the water bodies. So it becomes very, very important to remove nitrogen and phosphorus to prevent eutrophication. So what is happening at present? At present, the current scenario is that there is excessive nitrogen and phosphorus which are in getting into water bodies through fertilizers and domestic wastewaters. And as a result of this, there is widespread eutrophication in water bodies. And in addition to domestic, domestic sewage now not only contains nitrogen and phosphorus, but it also contains organic matter. Okay, so and organic matter, we term it as biochemical oxygen demand, and I hope everybody has come across this term as biochemical oxygen demand, because this is what we keep talking about, that biochemical oxygen demand. Our standards, our wastewater treatment plants are designed to remove biochemical oxygen demand. And why it is important is that if we don't remove organic matter from our water, okay, so like, just take an example of a lake. So there is a pristine lake and we have a town, and it is releasing directly without treatment domestic sewage into the lake. So that wastewater has a lot of organic matter. So once you release untreated wastewater into the lake, bacteria will start taking oxygen from lake water to decompose organic matter. Okay, and when they decompose organic matter, they convert organic matter into carbon dioxide and water. Now when they start taking organic matter, they will deplete oxygen from water body, from the lake. So lake will not have any oxygen. As a result, there will be a lot of fish kill, and you will see a lot of fish kill events. That is why our wastewater treatment plants are basically, secondary wastewater treatment plants are designed to remove organic matter. So why organic matter is important? As I just now told you, it causes anaerobic conditions. Now take example of Belandur Lake. Belandur Lake is highly anaerobic. It doesn't have any oxygen in it. It releases obnoxious and toxic gases. There has been events of fire and foaming in the lake. Why it is happening, a fire and foaming in the lake? Because there's a lot of organic matter going in, and we don't see fire and foaming in Jakkur Lake. Why? Because we are removing organic matter from Jakkur Lake, but we see another kind of problem, that is cyanobacteria and algal bloom in Jakkur Lake. And organic matter also cause risk to human health, again because of methane production, fire and foaming, and because sewage, organic matter itself contains a lot of pathogens, like harmful bacteria in it. And during the COVID times, this becomes this is of major concern. So now when we are talking about domestic sewage, there are three important components which are important: nitrogen, phosphorus, and organic matter. So now we have these sewage treatment plants, right? And I think most of the engineers, while we do our engineering, we learn how to design these sewage treatment plants, wastewater treatment plants. Now the basic objective of this wastewater treatment plant is to remove suspended solids, to remove organic matter, and to kill pathogens. These are the objectives of secondary sewage treatment plant. And if you go for tertiary, then you take care of removing nutrients. Again, it becomes very, very expensive to go ahead and remove nitrogen and phosphorus. And that is why there is another type of treatment which I'll explain in some time. So we have these sewage treatment plants designed to remove suspended solids, biodegradable organic matter, and pathogens. And so this is at centralized levels. At household levels, there are septic tanks or soak away pits. Now in septic tanks, again, it's an anaerobic process. Now in sewage treatment plant, it's an aerobic process. Aerobic process means we supply oxygen. Now, I think everybody has come across this, and maybe as a BBMP engineer, you might have visited these wastewater treatment plants, and there you have come across a biological reactor where there you will see large aerators moving around and churning water. Now, why the churning of water is done? Churning of water is done to supply oxygen to bacteria, because in wastewater treatment plants, bacteria are the workers. What they are doing? They are converting organic matter into carbon dioxide and water. And they are producing more microorganisms, which we call as sludge. Okay, so just understand here that in sewage treatment plants, we supply oxygen, and that is why the treatment becomes very expensive, because again, supplying compressed air or moving these aerators require a lot of energy, and this is the most energy intensive process, and that is why it's very expensive. Then here we have septic tanks for wastewater treatment. Septic tanks are installed at household levels. The small tanks, the retention time, like for how long water remains in the tank, it's around 48 hours, around 3 days. And it's an anaerobic process. Anaerobic means no oxygen is supplied. It's basically anaerobic bacteria which converts organic matter. And then further treatment is done through constructed wetland. Whereas in case of aerobic, in sewage treatment plant, retention time is 5 to 8 hours. So you can just see 5 to 8 hours retention time, but you have to input a lot of energy. Whereas in case of septic tank, 48 hours retention time, but no energy. So again, there is a trade-off between how much land requirements are there, because retention time is directly proportional to how much land area is required, and energy. Okay, so and then we have constructed wetlands. So as I just now told you that sewage treatment plant, secondary sewage treatment plant, and septic tanks, they don't remove nitrogen and phosphorus. They are not designed to remove nitrogen and phosphorus. There are processes which are there in a, wastewater treatment processes which can remove nitrogen and phosphorus, but they are very expensive. They are expensive and they require a lot of expert people to handle these processes at large scale. So then another option is deploying constructed wetlands. Now, I think if people have heard about Jakkur Lake is an example of a lake where there is a secondary sewage treatment plant and there is a constructed wetland. So constructed wetland is designed to remove nitrogen and phosphorus. Retention time of constructed wetland is around 4 to 8 days. So we design constructed wetland so that it can hold water for 4 to 8 days. And removal efficiency until now, maximum removal efficiency which has been reported till now in literature is around 20 to 30%. So now, after understanding the types of lakes, eutrophication, what causes eutrophication, and how we can remove nutrients before they enter into the water bodies, let us try to understand lake restoration in urban context. Now, when we say lake is polluted, we are saying that there is a lot of we are taking, so when we say polluted lake, the image that comes in our mind is Belandur Lake, right? Belandur Lake is so polluted that it is not even fit for irrigation. It's black, there is regular frequent incidences of fire in the lake, and the lake water is so bad that it is not even fit for irrigation. Whereas we have example of Jakkur Lake, which is restored, and according to people's perception, if you look at the table, it's termed as clean. That is as Veena was mentioning, that we have a descriptive way of characterizing the lake, and then there are normative values which are associated with the lake. So according to normative values, which is based on people's perception, lake is considered as clean, and currently the Jakkur Lake is used for recreation, fishing, washing clothes, washing clothes and irrigation, whereas Belandur Lake is still used for irrigation, but not irrigating edible crops. As far as I know, they are irrigating flowering crops in the command area. So taking the example of these two lakes, I will just present you with some data on once the lake is restored, what improvements we see. Okay, so we have been monitoring these two lakes, water quality monitoring of these two lakes since 3 years now. Jakkur Lake we have been monitoring since 2017, and Belandur we started a year later. So I'll be presenting the data just to tell you that, just to show you that when lake is restored, that when we have STP and when we have constructed wetland, these are the two restoration interventions we have seen till now, what we expect. So if you look at the
just
location of
interrupting, madam.
Yes, sir.
Can you please just explain in previous table about HRT days of the lake much more?
Hydraulic retention time. Yes, sir. So hydraulic retention time is basically, again, for how long water stays inside the lake. Now, lake volume we have estimated it is around 900 million liters. That is Veena's team has given us the number, and we know during the time of sampling that inflows into the lakes were around 10 million liters per day. So what we do is we divide the volume by the flow inflow, and we get the hydraulic retention time, which is around 90 days. Whereas in case of Belandur lake volume, we have taken from DPR, which was prepared in the year 2010. It's also available online. And we know we had measured inflows into the lake, which were around 300, which were around 251 MLD. So based on that, we have calculated hydraulic retention times. So in Belandur Lake, because the inflows are very high, hydraulic retention time was much lower as compared to Jakkur Lake. Yeah? Is it clear, sir?
Yes, it is clear.
Yes. So basically, even for any structure, if you have to calculate what is the retention time, I can just give an example. If you take a bucket and if you have a pipe coming into the bucket and you want to say that how much, and there is water entering through the pipe into the bucket, and you have to calculate for how long water will remain inside the bucket. So what you have to do is you have to take the volume of the bucket and then how much water is entering into the bucket, and that will give you the time for how long water stays in the bucket. So that's the hydraulic retention time. So in case of Jakkur, it's very high.
Yes, I think it is similar to what engineers we design in septic tank or in STP design. It is same for the
same principle.
lake. HRT, you calculate the similar way only.
Yes, sir. We calculated that, and it becomes very important when we have to model the lake. We have to do various simulations for the lake. Like suppose we say that so we model the lake, and then we say that okay, we want what happens if inflows into the Jakkur Lake has 0 nitrogen and 0 phosphorus. Then we will need HRT to find out how long it will take for lake to get cleaned up, how long it will take for no algae to grow. So for all these modeling aspects, and also interpretation of data, interpreting the data, whatever water quality data we collect, we need all these information. So these are the two lakes I'll be comparing, just to give you an idea of what happens when lake is restored. There's Jakkur Lake, which is in the northern part side of the Bangalore, and then we have southeast part Belandur Lake. So what we had done is we did measure a lot of water quality parameters, but for the ease of understanding, because I have only explained to you biochemical oxygen demand, I have explained to you total nitrogen, total phosphorus, pathogens, and cyanobacteria. So I'll be, and methane and gases. So I'll be just explaining or talking about these parameters. So you can see in pictures how we do the monitoring of the lakes. So we pick up samples for gas measurements, we pick up samples for water quality measurements, we pick up samples for dissolved oxygen measurements. And so we have a fully fledged lab at the A3. And in case BBMP engineers are really interested in understanding how water quality of lake is monitored, what kind of instrument is used, I think we are open to either conduct a training program for BBMP engineers or to post online videos, as Veena was mentioning, we can definitely come out and post those videos just to like, you know, inform or transfer knowledge to citizens on how we carry out lake monitoring. So that can be done. So these are the two lakes I'm talking about. So this is the Jakkur Lake. So Jakkur Lake has a STP. Then there is also Ross Wedge inflow. There is top are the inflows. Now you can hear me?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yes, Priyanka.
Yeah, I think
Yes,
they just lost a couple of sentences. Yeah, just start.
Okay, so it's just like, you know, so there is STP, then there are constructed wetlands, and these are two inlets, and then we also have outlets, and whatever boxes you are seeing are the sampling locations for which lake we have been sampling the lake. Similarly for Belandur has these three major inlets and these two outlets which we have been sampling. So coming quickly to the BOD levels, again, if you look at the Jakkur Lake and Belandur Lake, what you will see is that in Jakkur Lake, inflows, now the inflow JK3 is coming from the STP. Inflow BOD levels are very low, very, very low, which means that, like, you know, when you have STP in place, your inflows, BOD, organic matter entering into the lake is much less. But then you see that even in the outflows, the BOD level is not reducing, or like, you know, the BOD level is almost same. Now, why it is happening is because there are nutrients entering and it is getting converted into algae. Now, what is algae? Algae is also our organic matter. And once you measure it, it will also contribute to BOD of the lake. So basically, I'm trying to say is that, yes, STPs are definitely having an impact. We are getting reduced BOD into the lake. Even the in-lake BOD is much less. But if you look at inlet and outlet, there is not much difference. Whereas if you look at Belandur Lake, the inlet BOD from the inflows is very high. It's like, you know, there is a lot of variability because sometimes there are rain events, sometimes, like, you know, so it's all more than, like, you know, 100, and maximum goes up to 200 and 250 milligrams per liter, which is almost equivalent to what you see in Ross Wedge. And even in the outflow, the levels are very high. Very high BOD levels are there. Okay, and again, the point I want to also mention here is that for recreational use, if you go by Central Pollution Control Board's guidelines or standards for using a lake for bathing or for recreational use, BOD level should be less than 3 milligrams. And getting to those BOD levels for urban lakes is next to impossible at present, because the kind of investment we need to remove that organic matter and bring down the organic matter to 3 milligrams per liter is huge. So, like, you know, we really need to rethink how much levels of BOD we want to target in our lakes. So this is the one thing. So basically the takeaway from this slide is that, yes, we have seen reduction in BOD levels within Jakkur Lake. Looking at the fecal coliforms, which is basically pathogens. So you can see that in Belandur, pathogen levels are very high. Even at the outflows, you can see pathogens level are very high. Whereas in case of Jakkur, we have seen reduction in pathogen levels. There has been 2 to 3 log orders reduction in pathogen level. So definitely treatment helps. If we are treating our wastewater and allowing treating wastewater to enter, we will see a lot more reduction, improvement in quality. Coming to methane gas, so as you know that, like, you know, there was a lot of issues around Belandur Lake catching fire. So we did picked up samples of dissolved gases in Belandur Lake, and you can see that the level of methane gas in Belandur Lake is around 10 times, around 100 times higher than what we saw in Jakkur Lake, which means that when a lot of organic matter, sewage with a lot of organic matter is entering into the lake, the suspended solids are depositing into the lake bed, and because there is no oxygen, anaerobic bacteria are converting organic matter deposits at the lake bed into methane gas. And that is the reason we see so much like, fire, frequent fire events in Belandur Lake. So we also measured algae or cyanobacteria in the lake. And in case of Belandur Lake, there was no cyanobacteria. There was no algae in the lake. Now you can ask this question to me that, okay, we have this Belandur Lake and we have Jakkur Lake. Belandur Lake receives untreated wastewater, raw sewage. It doesn't have algae. And then we have Jakkur Lake, which receives treated effluent. It has so much algae. Now the answer is that in Belandur Lake, because there is so much organic matter entering into, raw sewage has a lot of organic matter, though there are nutrients also, but there is so much organic matter that the processes which dominates degradation of organic matter are dominant in that lake. Whereas in case of Jakkur Lake, because there is no organic matter or very less organic matter entering into the lake, the processes, in-lake processes, which are dominated by nutrients are dominant in Jakkur Lake. That is why you see that for Jakkur Lake, the lake has very high chlorophyll A levels. Like, mostly lake is always in eutrophic state, and most of the time in hyper-eutrophic state, which means like, the chlorophyll A levels are very, very high. And if you look at the oxygen levels, the black line shows oxygen levels in Belandur Lake. It's like, almost zero, or maybe sometimes it's 0.2, 0.3 milligrams per liter. But if you look at Jakkur Lake, oxygen levels are very high, and these oxygen levels are measured during the afternoon. Now you can ask this question, like, the saturation oxygen levels, saturation dissolved oxygen. Now water, let me just explain it to you. Water can dissolve, water is a universal solvent. It can dissolve everything in it, like, all kind of elements, all kind of nutrients get dissolved. Even gases dissolve in water, right? So according to science, 9 milligrams per liter is the saturation level of dissolved oxygen in water. That is the maximum concentration you can find of dissolved oxygen in water. But when you see in Jakkur Lake, we have got dissolved oxygen level up to like, more than 25 milligrams per liter. So you can ask this question, why it is happening? It is happening because there's a lot of algae. When there is algae, now algae behaves like a plant. It's just like a plant, right? During the day, they release oxygen. So when we are measuring oxygen levels in the afternoon, at that time, photosynthesis reaction is going on and a lot of oxygen is being released, and that is what is getting captured, and we see very high oxygen levels. So when for monitoring purposes, when pollution control boards are monitoring lakes during the afternoon, they will say that, like, oxygen levels are very high, and they will be very happy to see that high oxygen levels. But the point I want to make is that even very high oxygen levels are not good, because they indicate that there are very high chlorophyll, very high cyanobacterial bloom in the lake, which need to be addressed. Just wanted to raise that point. And this is like, this graph basically shows you what happens. So basically algae behaves like they are just like plants. They release oxygen in the afternoon during the day, and once sun sets, they will start consuming oxygen and releasing carbon dioxide, right? So what we did was we started measuring oxygen along the depth of the lake during the day, early morning, before sunrise. And before sunrise, what we found was that at 1.5 meters from the surface of the lake, dissolved oxygen levels were very low. It was less than 4 milligrams per liter. Why it is happening? It is happening because of algae. You just have to keep this in mind. This is happening because of algae, and that is why sometimes when people go early morning for a walk in the lake, they will see dead fish floating on the lake, and they will just get surprised that, oh, this lake looks so clean and dissolved oxygen levels are so good. Then why we are seeing dead fish floating on the water? Dead fish is floating because there is algae. Algae is consuming oxygen because there is no sunlight early in the morning. And at those depths, there is no oxygen. So just giving a little bit idea of, like, why we measure, and measuring dissolved oxygen is very important early morning, afternoon, and in the night, and not just afternoon. So So, Arpana, how much time is left? I'll just quickly rush through my slides.
Yeah, actually we are very short, but since there were some hiccups and you started late, maybe five more minutes.
5 more minutes.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So now the question here is, now I told you that there is Belandur Lake, Jakkur Lake. Belandur Lake has fire and foaming problem. Jakkur Lake restored, but still has some issues with fish kills and bird kill events. Now, after when these things started frequently happening in Jakkur Lake, there were other additional interventions which were done at Jakkur Lake, and also additional interventions done at Belandur Lake. And then I will also discuss about goals for restoration. Now in this slide, I will tell you that earlier there were 10 MLD STP, then it was upgraded to 15 MLD STP, and additional technology was employed to remove nitrogen. Okay, and in addition to that, effective microorganisms balls were added into the lake. So balls were added at the inlet and the outlet of the lake, so that these balls are made of some kind of a bacteria which can eat up nutrients, eat up microorganisms, so that the lake water quality is improved. So we wanted to look at the effectiveness of interventions, how effective these interventions are. So if you look at the x-axis, you will see before STP was upgraded, after STP was upgraded, and after STP was upgraded, and when EMB wall was added, what were the nutrient levels at the outlet of the STP. Okay, so we did not see any improvement in that, and for constructed wetland also we did not see any improvement. So what I'm trying to say here is, the takeaway from this slide is that even after deploying the interventions at the inlet, we did not see any change in the nutrient levels. Nitrate levels were almost same. And this slide shows you at the outlet of the lake at JK6 and JK7, before EMB walls and after EMB walls, there was no change in BOD levels, no changes total nitrogen and total phosphorus and total nitrogen level. So now you can ask this question that, okay, even when intervention was deployed, why don't we see improvement in lake quality? There should be some improvement in lake quality, right? So I will give answer to these questions after I will talk about Belandur Lake, what was done in Belandur Lake. So basically, again, this slide shows that there is no significant improvement in the BOD quality at the outlet, no significant improvement in the total nitrate and phosphate levels at the outlet of the lake. Coming to intervention deployed at Belandur Lake. So these are, I told you that there were 3 major inlets which were discharging raw wastewater into Belandur Lake. So you can see what was the main intervention was done was that they started aerating, or BDA started aerating the drain. Now, coming to the concept of retention time, I told you that, in aerobic treatment plant, in STPs, we need to give at least 5 hours of retention time, 5 to 8 hours of retention time for bacteria to grow and consume organic matter and convert it into carbon dioxide and water. Now, if we are directly doing this kind of aeration in a flowing stream, do you think that any change will happen or any improvement in water quality will happen? Water is just flowing. We are not even providing oxygen to these bacteria for maybe even for a minute, because water is just flowing. So how can we see impact of intervention? So it's just a waste of money, because I don't know whom, we engineers, we know how to design wastewater treatment plants. In wastewater treatment plants, we provide 8 hours of retention time. If we just simply aerate running sewage, it will not have any impact. Similarly, for other inlet, the similar thing was done. So we looked at the inlet and outlet, and we found that before and after aerators, there was no change in the, and it was very obvious, because how we can expect change when we are just aerating it water for a few seconds. So so then I asked you this question, I posed this question that you can have this question in mind, that even after intervention, why we don't see any improvement in water quality. Now there can be 2 reasons for it. First, that the interventions are under-designed, or the technology is not good, right? So there can be 2 things. First, the technology itself is not good. Second, the scale of intervention is not good. Scale of intervention means the size. We don't know how big our constructed wetland should be, what the size of constructed wetland should be, or how long we need to do the aeration to see significant improvement in lake water quality. So when we say significant improvement in lake water quality, again, this is determined by what our benchmarks are. Like, so when we say we don't know how big our constructed wetland should be to see improvement in water quality, it's a statement in the sense, like, that we don't know what should be the nitrate levels in the lake to prevent eutrophication. If we know that nitrate levels in the lake should be 3 milligrams, I'm just giving a hypothetical number, 3 milligrams per liter, then we can go back and design our constructed wetland. Okay, our constructed wetland, when we design it to be this big, which is called as a scale, this big, then we will be able to reach 3 milligrams per liter of nitrate level in lake. So this kind of goals are missing. We don't know what our restoration goals are. And this is also evident from the DPR which is there online on the lake for Belandur Lake. Okay, so so there are restoration objectives which are mentioned for Belandur Lake. First restoration objective is to improve the trophic state or water quality of lake. Now it's a very qualitative statement. What do you mean by improvement? How much improvement? It's just open-ended. Like, improvement is also it's a qualitative statement. We don't have any number, and when we don't have any number, we don't know how big our constructed wetland should be, or how big our wastewater treatment should be, or what kind of treatment we should give to achieve the trophic state, that trophic state in lake. So what I'm trying to say is that restoration goals are very qualitative, and with the qualitative goal, how we are going to design any interventions. I hope you're getting my point. To design a wastewater treatment plant, like, when we design a wastewater treatment plant, we know that the outlet BOD quality should be 30 milligrams per liter. Now, in this case, in constructed wetland, when we design a constructed wetland, we don't know what our outlet quality should be, because right now we don't know how much nitrates or how much nitrogen should be there in the lake, which will not allow bacteria or or algae to grow. So in the absence of these quantitative goals, we don't know what kind of interventions we want to put in place. And as Veena also mentioned in her talk, that there are various agencies, and different agencies have different, though the intention is good, intention is to achieve clean lakes, but the approaches are very different. Now, in case of BDA, when the DPR is prepared, it's left open-ended that we want to improve trophic state without even mentioning whether we want to have oligotrophic, mesotrophic, eutrophic, which state. And then when it comes to auditing agency, it's a report which I accessed from state CAG India, prepared by Karnataka state government. They were looking at the restoration project and how effective restoration project have been. And what they did was they started comparing the quality of lakes to class B. Class B is the quality where BOD requirements is 3 milligrams per liter. Okay, and pathogens should be 500 mpn per 100 ml. It's a kind of quality which is maintained in Ganga river when river is used for mass bathing. Now, I pose this question to you, that when in urban context, when lake is receiving treated effluent from secondary treatment plant, is it possible for us to achieve this quality? And first question is this, and second question is, that when restoration objective itself has not mentioned what the goal is, how come the auditing agency is comparing the water quality to class B quality? So there is there is so much discrepancy in the way the restoration plans are implemented, and the plans and effectiveness is measured. There is so much difference in that. Again, just now showing you that the quality is very high, the quality we are trying to, the way auditing agency monitors the quality, they are saying that it should be class B quality, which is like, you know, in the current condition, with the current amount of finances we have, it's very difficult to achieve. I think that's why it's very, very important to have realistic goals in mind, rather than having these goals which are very hard to achieve, and then we will non-comply every time. Like, you know, BBMP, BDA will never be able to comply with these goals because these goals are non-achievable in the current scenario. You need huge investment. Let us have goals which can be realized in the current scenario. So coming to Pollution Control Board now, again, like, you know, so Pollution Control Board also comes into picture because they have their mandate is to regulate surface water body, right? So they pick up sample from lakes and they say which category lake water quality falls, whether it is A, B, C, D, E. Okay, so they will pick up, they will measure
I'm so sorry to interrupt you.
Just 2 more slides. I'm just almost done.
Sure.
So this is the water quality index. So they have also come up with the water quality index. So now you can see in this table, based on the class, they are saying that Belandu Lake falls in class E, which is saying it is fit for irrigation. But then water quality index is saying it is unsatisfactory. Unsatisfactory as a drinking water source. But the question is, are we trying to achieve, are we trying to go for a drinking water source, or are we trying to restore Belandu Lake for drinking water? These kind of contradictions are, like, you know, are there, which need to be resolved. So I think all the agencies need to come together and sit down and come up with a clear vision and a single vision for the lake. And then our center at CSCI center at ATRI has come up with a very nice document of how to solve lake problems. We have come up with these 4 steps. I've provided this link. If the PPT is shared with you, you can go through this link, read this document, and then you will come to know how we can go step by step to achieve clean lakes in lake. So I think the first important thing is to have consensus. There are various stakeholders. Every stakeholder has a different definition of clean lake. To have a consent on what do we mean by clean lake, and then have a quantitative restoration goals which are economically feasible. And I think as the time is less now, so I'll just rush through it. And also engaging with stakeholders. So AG has been engaging with stakeholder, and we are also creating, Veena can explain it more later on citizen dashboards, but this is like, you know, we are creating this online platform where citizens can also contribute in monitoring and managing lake water quality. And we are also working on developing technologies, decentralized technologies to treat water. So as constructed wetland is one of the technologies, but there are also other technologies for which we don't have any evidence whether they work or not. So we are also creating, developing these kind of technologies. Yeah, so we have been at ATRI, we have been regularly engaged with the, like, you know, various groups, through workshops, through scientists, all kind of stakeholders to come up with the solutions to manage lakes. And I think I'm done with my presentation. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks so much, Priyanka. So
I'm like, you know, extremely sorry for taking like, you know, extra time, but yeah, thank you.
That's so all right. Thank you, Priyanka. So
Priyanka, we're super grateful for you to doing this. So thank you.